The fluorescent lights at Charles de Gaulle Airport hummed like angry wasps above my head as I watched my wife of 12 years destroy my life with 3 taps on her phone screen. Lana and Halloway stood at the Air France counter, her platinum blonde hair catching the harsh terminal lighting, speaking in hushed tones to the gate agent while gesturing dismissively in my direction. "Monsieur Halloway?" The agent's voice carried across the departure lounge with practiced politeness. "I have a message from your wife." I already knew what was coming. The argument in our hotel room that morning had escalated beyond our usual Cold War into something far more vicious. Lana had discovered my plans to restructure our business partnership, to finally claim equal control of the construction company I'd built from nothing while she played financial advisor from her Manhattan office. She'd called it betrayal. I'd called it justice. Now she was showing me what real betrayal looked like. "Your ticket has been canceled," the agent continued, her English heavily accented but clear enough to cut through the ambient noise of travelers rushing past. "Madam Halloway asked me to tell you to learn your place." The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. Around us, passengers wheeled luggage toward their gates, families embraced, business travelers typed frantically on laptops. Normal people living normal lives while mine imploded in real time. Lana boarded without looking back. Her designer heels clicked against the jet bridge floor as she disappeared into first class, leaving me stranded 3,000 miles from home with no phone. She'd confiscated it during our fight, claiming I'd been recording her, no wallet, and no way to prove my identity to anyone who might help. I sat down in the nearest plastic chair and waited. Not because I had a plan, but because standing felt like admitting defeat. The departure board above my head updated every few minutes, flights to New York, London, Rome filling up and taking off, while I remained frozen in place. Hours passed. Security guards eyed me suspiciously as I occupied the same seat through multiple boarding announcements. Other passengers came and went, their conversations blending into white noise that matched the buzzing in my head. Lana had planned this perfectly. She knew I'd transferred most of our liquid assets into joint accounts she controlled. She knew I'd left my backup credit cards in our hotel safe. She knew exactly how to strand me here while she flew home to spin whatever story would paint her as the victim. The terminal began to empty as the last flights of the evening departed. Cleaning crews emerged with their carts and mops, preparing for the overnight lull. I'd been sitting in the same spot for nearly 8 hours, watching my wife's calculated cruelty play out in slow motion. That's when I noticed her. The woman approached from my left, moving with the kind of confident stride that suggested she owned whatever space she occupied. Tall, probably in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my truck. She carried herself like someone accustomed to getting what she wanted without having to ask twice. "Darren Halloway," she said, settling into the seat beside me without invitation. Her voice carried a slight accent I couldn't place, maybe Eastern European, maybe just expensive private schools. "You look like a man who could use a friend." I studied her face, searching for any sign of recognition. Nothing. She was a complete stranger, yet she knew my name and had sought me out in an airport where I'd been effectively invisible for hours. "Do we know each other?" I asked. "Not yet, but I know your wife." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Lana and Halloway, financial consultant, social climber, and apparently expert at public humiliation. The casual way she delivered that last part made my stomach tighten. How much did this stranger know about my situation? How many people had witnessed my abandonment? "I'm Seren Drevin," she continued, extending a manicured hand, "and I have a proposition for you." I shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the weight of what looked like a very expensive watch on her wrist. "What kind of proposition?" "The kind that could turn your worst day into your wife's worst nightmare." She glanced around the nearly empty terminal, then leaned closer. I need a husband for the evening. Someone presentable, intelligent, and properly motivated. You need transportation, documentation, and access to resources that could help you respond to what just happened here. Why would you help a complete stranger? Because your wife made a mistake when she chose to humiliate you so publicly. She involved airport staff, created documentation, left a trail that can be traced and verified. That kind of arrogance always creates opportunities for people who know how to exploit them. Seren pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. It displayed what looked like an official airport manifest, complete with timestamps and staff notations. My name appeared multiple times, along with comments that made my jaw clench. Passenger appears unstable, I read aloud. Refuse to leave departure area. May require security intervention. Your wife was thorough, Seren said, scrolling through additional entries. She spoke with 3 different agents, a security supervisor, and someone from passenger services. All of them have your description, your passport number, and instructions to deny you assistance. The scope of Lana's preparation was staggering. This wasn't a spontaneous act of anger. It was a coordinated campaign designed to trap me in France while she returned to New York with complete control of our assets and our narrative. What exactly are you offering? I asked. Transportation out of here within the hour. Full restoration of your travel documents and financial access. Legal representation if your wife tries to claim abandonment or mental instability. And most importantly, the resources to ensure she regrets this decision for the rest of her life. Serene's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at it, smiled, and stood up. My driver is here. You have about 30 seconds to decide whether you want to spend the night on an airport bench or in a suite at the George V. I looked around the terminal one more time. The cleaning crews were working their way toward my section, and the few remaining passengers were either sleeping across multiple seats or staring at their phones with the glazed expression of people trapped in travel limbo. Lana had left me here to suffer, to learn my place, as she'd put it. She expected me to crawl back to New York broken and grateful for whatever scraps of dignity she might allow me to keep. What do you need me to do? I asked, standing up. For now, just follow me and try to look like someone worth saving. We walked through the terminal together, past the security checkpoint and toward the exit. Seren moved like she owned the place, nodding to staff members who seemed to recognize her. No one questioned our passage or asked to see identification. Outside, a black Mercedes sedan waited at the curb with its engine running. The driver, a compact man in a dark suit, opened the rear door without speaking. I hesitated for just a moment, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Then I thought about Lana's smug expression as she'd boarded that plane, confident that she'd left me powerless and humiliated. I thought about 12 years of marriage to a woman who'd never seen me as an equal partner, only as a useful tool for building the life she wanted. I got in the car. As we pulled away from the terminal, Seren handed me a new phone and a leather portfolio. Your identity has been verified through alternative channels, she said. Your accounts will be reactivated within the hour. Your travel history has been documented and backed up to secure servers. I opened the portfolio and found copies of every document Lana had taken from me, plus several I'd never seen before. Bank statements, property records, business filings, a complete financial picture of our marriage that revealed patterns I'd been too trusting to notice. How did you get all this? Your wife isn't the only one with connections. The difference is, mine don't require me to humiliate my husband to prove a point. The Mercedes glided through the Paris streets as the city came alive around us. Cafe lights twinkled on sidewalks where couples shared late dinners, and the Seine reflected the glow of passing boats. It was beautiful, in a way that made Lana's betrayal feel even more surreal. There's something you should know, Seren said as we turned onto a tree-lined boulevard. Your wife didn't act alone. She had help planning this. She handed me her phone again, this time showing a series of text messages between Lana and someone named Viktor Morel. The conversation was explicit in its planning and cruel in its tone. "Make sure he can't follow immediately," Viktor had written. "The longer he's stuck there, the more time we have to secure everything." "Already handled," Lana had replied. "He won't be a problem." I scrolled through more messages, each one revealing another layer of coordination between my wife and this Viktor person. They'd been planning this humiliation for weeks, timing it to coincide with what looked like a major financial transaction. "Who is Viktor Morel?" I asked. "Someone who's about to learn that underestimating you was a serious mistake." Seren took back her phone and leaned forward to speak to the driver. "Change of plans, Henri. Take us to the office first." The car turned down a narrow street lined with elegant buildings that looked like they'd been there since Napoleon. We stopped in front of a discreet entrance marked only with a small brass plaque reading, "Drevin and Associates." "I thought we were going to a hotel," I said. "We are. But first, you need to see exactly what your wife has been doing while you've been building her dream life." Serene's smile was predatory now, all pretense of sympathy gone. "And then we're going to show her what happens when she tries to destroy the wrong man." As we walked toward the building, I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation was still there, burning in my chest like acid. But underneath it, something harder was taking shape, something that felt like purpose. Lana had wanted to teach me my place. She was about to learn that she'd seriously misjudged what that place actually was. The elevator in Seren's building moved silently upward, its polished brass fixtures reflecting our distorted images as we rose through the heart of what was clearly a very expensive operation. When the doors opened on the 7th floor, I stepped into an office that looked more like a war room. 3 people worked at computer stations arranged around a central conference table, their screens displaying financial data, legal documents, and what appeared to be surveillance footage. The space hummed with the kind of focused energy I recognized from construction sites when a major project was coming together. "Darren, meet my team," Seren said, gesturing toward the nearest workstation. "Claire handles digital forensics, Marcus specializes in corporate investigation, and Jennifer manages legal strategy. They've been working on your situation since about an hour after your wife boarded her flight." Claire, a woman in her 30s with short red hair and intense green eyes, looked up from her screen. "We've recovered the complete communication thread between Lana and Viktor Morel. It goes back 6 months. She turned her monitor toward me, revealing an interface that looked like something from a spy movie. Chat logs, email threads, phone records, even location data, all organized into a timeline that told a story I wasn't prepared to see. "Your wife has been planning this for half a year," Marcus said, his voice carrying a slight Boston accent. "The affair, the financial manipulation, even today's airport incident. It's all documented." I leaned closer to read the messages, my hands gripping the back of Claire's chair as the scope of Lana's betrayal became clear. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been systematically transferring our assets, building a case for my supposed instability, and coordinating with Viktor to ensure I'd be left with nothing when she finally made her move. "Viktor Morel is the son of a luxury car dealer in Paris," Jennifer explained, pulling up what looked like a comprehensive background report. "Old money family, multiple properties across Europe, and a reputation for acquiring other people's assets through questionable means." The photo on the screen showed a man in his early 40s with the kind of polished appearance that screamed inherited wealth. Expensive suit, perfect teeth, the confident smile of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "He specializes in targeting married women with significant assets," Seren added, settling into the chair at the head of the conference table. "Your wife is his 3rd conquest in 2 years. The pattern is always the same. Seduce the wife, isolate her from her husband, then help her liquidate everything before disappearing." I straightened up, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Lana thinks she's in love with him." Lana thinks she's found someone who appreciates her sophistication, Claire corrected. Viktor thinks he's found another mark. They're both wrong, but for different reasons. Seren opened a leather folder and spread several documents across the table. Bank statements, property transfers, corporate filings, all bearing Lana's signature and yesterday's date. She moved fast once she got back to New York, Seren said. Liquidated your joint investment account, transferred the funds to a shell company Viktor set up last month, filed paperwork claiming you've been mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. The documents painted a picture of a woman covering her tracks while building a case for her own protection. According to the papers, I'd been exhibiting erratic behavior for months, making threats and showing signs of psychological breakdown. None of this is true, I said. Of course not. But it doesn't matter if she can make it stick long enough to complete the asset transfer. Jennifer pulled up another screen showing what looked like a court filing. She's requesting an emergency restraining order based on your alleged behavior in Paris. I read through the petition, recognizing Lana's careful phrasing and attention to detail. She'd taken every argument we'd had over the past year and reframed it as evidence of my deteriorating mental state. The airport incident was described as an escalating pattern of obsessive and threatening behavior. How is this legal? I asked. It's not, Seren replied. But it doesn't have to be legal to be effective. If she can keep you tied up in court for a few months, she and Viktor can liquidate everything and disappear. The room fell silent, except for the soft clicking of keyboards as the team continued their work. I walked to the window and looked out at the Paris skyline, trying to process what I'd learned. 12 years of marriage, and I'd never suspected that my wife was capable of this level of calculated betrayal. What do you want in return? I asked, turning back to face Seren. I want Viktor Morel destroyed, she said without hesitation. Professionally, financially, and socially. I want his reputation so thoroughly ruined that he'll never be able to run this scam again. Why? Because he did the same thing to my sister 3 years ago. She lost everything, her business, her house, her children's college funds. By the time she realized what was happening, Viktor had disappeared with $2 million and left her facing bankruptcy. Seren's expression hardened as she spoke, revealing the personal motivation behind her professional demeanor. This wasn't just business for her. It was revenge. Where is your sister now? She rebuilt her life, but it took everything she had. Viktor moved on to his next target without consequences. Until now. I looked around the room at the 3 people working to unravel my wife's scheme, then back at Seren. What exactly are you proposing? A coordinated response that hits them where they're most vulnerable. Viktor's reputation depends on his ability to operate quietly. Your wife's plan requires her to maintain credibility with the courts and her professional network. We're going to make both of those things impossible. Claire turned her screen toward us again, this time showing what looked like a social media monitoring dashboard. Lana's been posting about her trip to Paris, positioning herself as the victim of an unstable husband. The narrative is already spreading through her social circle. The posts were masterfully crafted, each one building sympathy while subtly undermining my credibility. Photos of her looking worried and vulnerable, captions about difficult decisions, and protecting herself from an increasingly volatile situation. She's good at this, I admitted. She's had practice, Marcus said, pulling up additional files. We found evidence of 2 previous relationships where she used similar tactics. Both men ended up financially ruined and professionally discredited. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd thought I was Lana's first husband, her partner in building something lasting. Instead, I was just the latest victim in a pattern of predatory behavior that went back years. How did I miss all this? Because she's very good at what she does, Seren said, and because you trusted her. That's not a weakness, Darren. It's what made you vulnerable to someone who doesn't understand trust. Jennifer stood up and walked to a whiteboard covered with what looked like a flowchart. Here's what we're going to do. First, we establish your credibility by documenting exactly what happened at the airport. We have security footage, staff interviews, and communication records that prove Lana orchestrated your abandonment. She drew a line connecting several boxes on the chart. Second, we expose the financial fraud by tracing the asset transfers and revealing Viktor's involvement. The shell company he created has his fingerprints all over it. Third, Claire added, we release everything simultaneously across multiple channels: social media, news outlets, professional networks. Everywhere Lana and Viktor have built their reputations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scope. Instead of fighting Lana's narrative in court, they were going to bypass the legal system entirely and appeal directly to public opinion. What's my role in all this? You're going to be exactly what Viktor and your wife don't expect, Seren said. A man who refuses to be destroyed quietly. She handed me a new phone and a set of car keys. There's a suite reserved for you at the George 5. Get some rest, clean up, and prepare yourself for what comes next. Tomorrow we start fighting back. As I prepared to leave, Claire called my name. Darren, there's something else you should see. She pulled up a final screen showing what appeared to be airline records. Viktor booked a flight to Switzerland for tomorrow evening. One-way ticket, first class. He's running? He's preparing to run, which means we have less than 24 hours to make sure he doesn't get the chance. I looked around the room one more time, taking in the focused energy of people who dedicated their evening to helping a stranger fight back against an injustice they had no obligation to care about. Why are you really doing this? I asked Seren. Because someone has to, she replied. And because you strike me as the kind of man who won't waste the opportunity. The drive to the hotel gave me time to think about what I'd learned and what I was about to become. 24 hours ago, I'd been a successful businessman with a beautiful wife and what I thought was a solid marriage. Now, I was a man with nothing to lose and the resources to make sure my enemies shared that experience. Lana had wanted to teach me my place. She was about to learn that she'd seriously underestimated where that place actually was. The suite at the George 5 was everything Seren had promised. Elegant, spacious, and equipped with enough technology to run a small corporation. I spent the night reviewing the files her team had compiled, building a complete picture of how thoroughly my wife had betrayed me. By morning, I understood exactly what I was dealing with. Lana wasn't just unfaithful, she was a professional predator who'd been planning my destruction for months. Viktor wasn't just her lover. He was her partner in a scheme to steal everything I'd worked for and leave me discredited and broken. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, it filled me with a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Seren arrived at 9 with coffee and a briefcase full of documents. She looked like she'd been awake all night, but her energy was focused and intense. Viktor's flight has been moved up, she said without preamble. He's leaving for Switzerland at 2 this afternoon instead of tonight. Something spooked him. What kind of something? We're not sure. But our source at his hotel says he's been making frantic phone calls since 6 this morning and had his luggage sent down an hour ago. She opened her briefcase and pulled out what looked like a legal document. The good news is that we've identified the Swiss account where your assets are being transferred. The bad news is that once Viktor gets there, he'll have access to withdraw everything in cash. I studied the document, recognizing account numbers that matched our joint savings and investment accounts. The amounts were staggering, nearly $2 million that represented 15 years of careful saving and successful business growth. How do we stop him? We don't stop him. We make sure that when he tries to access those funds, the entire world is watching. Seren's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She answered it, listened for a moment, then smiled in a way that made me glad I was on her side. That was Claire. She's finished preparing the evidence package. Everything is ready for release. What kind of evidence package? Security footage from the airport showing your wife coordinating your abandonment, Audio recordings of her phone calls with Viktor planning the asset transfer, documentation of Viktor's previous victims and their financial losses, bank records proving the fraudulent nature of the account transfers. She handed me a tablet displaying what looked like a news article. Jennifer has contacts at 3 major financial publications and 2 television networks. The story goes live in 4 hours, timed to coincide with Viktor's arrival in Switzerland. The article was devastating in its thoroughness and clinical in its presentation. It laid out the entire scheme without sensationalism, letting the facts speak for themselves. Lana and Viktor were portrayed not as passionate lovers, but as calculating criminals who'd targeted vulnerable spouses for financial exploitation. "This will destroy them both," I said. "That's the point. Your wife wanted to ruin your reputation to cover her theft. We're going to show the world exactly who she really is." My new phone rang with a number I recognized, Lana's cell. I looked at Seren, who nodded encouragingly. "Answer it. Let her think she's still in control." I accepted the call and put it on speaker. Lana's voice filled the suite, tight with barely controlled panic. "Darren, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I'm in Paris," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Where you left me." "That's not—" "Look, there was a misunderstanding at the airport. I was upset. I made some poor decisions. I want to fix this." The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. Something had changed since yesterday, something that had shaken her confidence in her carefully laid plans. What kind of misunderstanding? The ticket cancellation, the things I said to the staff. I was angry, but I never meant for you to be stranded there. I've already booked you a new flight home. Seren handed me a note. "She knows we have the evidence." "How did you know I was stranded?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "You just said you never meant for me to be stranded, but you also said the ticket cancellation was a misunderstanding. If it was a misunderstanding, how did you know I'd be stranded?" The line went quiet for several seconds. When Lana spoke again, her voice had shifted from desperate to calculating. "I don't understand what you're trying to say." "I'm saying that you planned this, Lana, all of it. The fight, the cancellation, the instructions to airport staff. You wanted me stuck in Paris while you and Viktor liquidated our assets." "Who is Viktor?" "Darren, you're not making sense. I think you need to come home so we can talk about this properly." Her ability to lie so smoothly, even when caught, was almost impressive. But I could hear the fear underneath the performance. "I'll be home soon," I said. "We'll definitely talk." I ended the call and looked at Seren. She's scared. She should be. Viktor probably told her that someone was asking questions about their Swiss accounts. They know their timeline has been compromised. Seren's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and smiled. "Viktor just checked out of his hotel. He's heading for the airport 3 hours early." "Does that change our plans?" "It makes them better. Panic leads to mistakes, and mistakes create opportunities." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Paris morning. "There's something I haven't told you about Viktor's previous victims. My sister wasn't the first to try fighting back." "What happened to the others?" "They were discredited before they could expose him, portrayed as unstable ex-wives seeking revenge against innocent men. Viktor has a very effective legal team and a talent for manipulating public perception." I joined her at the window, understanding the implication. But this time is different. This time, we have documentation of the pattern. We have proof that this isn't a domestic dispute. It's a criminal enterprise. And most importantly, we have you. What makes me different? You're not a discredited ex-wife. You're a successful businessman with a clean reputation and no history of vindictive behavior. When you tell this story, people will listen. Seren's phone rang again. This time it was Claire, calling with an update on Viktor's movements. "He's at Charles de Gaulle," Claire reported through the speaker. "But there's a problem with his flight. Apparently, there are questions about his passport validity." Seren's smile was predatory. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that require him to speak with customs officials before he can board. It could take hours to resolve. I looked at Seren with new respect. You arranged this. I arranged for the proper authorities to be made aware of his travel patterns and financial activities. What happens next is entirely up to them. The pieces of her plan were falling into place with military precision. Viktor was trapped at the airport, unable to flee before the story broke. Lana was panicking in New York, trying to manage a situation that was already beyond her control. And in a few hours, the entire world would know exactly what they'd tried to do. What do you need me to do? Be ready to go public. The networks will want interviews. The newspapers will want statements. This story is going to explode, and you need to be prepared to tell your side of it. She handed me a folder containing what looked like talking points and media strategy. Jennifer has prepared some guidelines for handling press inquiries. The key is to stay factual, avoid emotional language, and let the evidence speak for itself. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Halloway, this is Janet Morrison from the Financial Times. I understand you have information about a significant fraud case involving international asset transfer. I looked at Seren, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I said. I believe I do. Would you be available for an interview this afternoon? We're planning to run the story in tomorrow's edition. I'll be available. After I ended the call, Seren handed me a new suit, still in its garment bag. You'll want to look the part. The camera adds 10 pounds and subtracts credibility if you're not properly dressed. As I prepared for what was coming, I thought about the man I'd been 24 hours ago. Trusting, naive, willing to believe that the woman I'd married actually loved me. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder and more realistic. Lana had wanted to destroy me quietly, to steal everything I'd built, while leaving me powerless to fight back. Instead, she'd created an enemy who understood exactly how much damage the truth could do. The war was just beginning, but I already knew how it would end, not with my destruction, but with hers. The Financial Times interview took place in Seren's office, with cameras positioned to capture both the evidence displays and my responses to increasingly pointed questions. Janet Morrison was a seasoned investigative journalist who'd built her reputation exposing financial fraud, and she approached the story with the thoroughness it deserved. Let me make sure I understand the timeline, she said, reviewing her notes. Your wife canceled your return ticket, instructed airport staff to deny you assistance, then immediately began transferring assets to accounts controlled by her accomplice in Switzerland. That's correct. The coordination was precise enough to suggest months of planning. And you have documentation of this planning? Claire stepped forward with a tablet displaying the message threads between Lana and Viktor. 6 months of communications detailing every aspect of the scheme, the affair, the financial transfers, even the psychological manipulation designed to make Mr. Halloway appear unstable. Janet reviewed the messages, her expression growing more serious with each screen. These are quite damaging. Have they been authenticated? By 3 independent digital forensics experts, Seren replied. The metadata confirms the dates, times, and originating devices. There's no question about their authenticity. The interview continued for 2 hours, covering every aspect of the scheme and the evidence supporting it. Janet was particularly interested in Viktor's pattern of targeting married women with significant assets. You're saying this wasn't an isolated incident? Viktor Morel has used identical tactics against at least 4 women in the past 3 years, I explained. The pattern is consistent: seduce the wife, isolate her from her husband, help her liquidate assets, then disappear before the consequences catch up. And your wife was unaware of this pattern? My wife was a willing participant. The evidence shows she initiated contact with Viktor and proposed the specific methods used to transfer our assets. Janet made additional notes, then looked directly into the camera. This appears to be a case of organized fraud rather than a simple extramarital affair. The financial losses exceed $2 million, and the international nature of the scheme suggests potential criminal liability. After the interview, Seren and I watched the story spread across digital platforms with viral intensity. Within hours, Viktor Morel scam was trending on social media, and financial news outlets were picking up the story for their evening broadcasts. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, legal inquiries, and messages from other potential victims who'd recognized Viktor's tactics. The response was overwhelming and immediate. "Lana's trying to reach you," Claire announced, monitoring the phone traffic. 17 calls in the past hour. "Let her wait," I said. "I'm curious to see how she handles this." The answer came at 6 p.m. when Lana held her own press conference outside our Manhattan apartment building. I watched the live stream with growing amazement at her ability to maintain composure while her world collapsed around her. "My husband has been struggling with mental health issues for several months," she told the assembled reporters. "This elaborate conspiracy theory is unfortunately consistent with his recent paranoid behavior." She was good, calm, sympathetic, projecting the image of a concerned wife dealing with an unstable spouse. If I hadn't seen the evidence myself, I might have believed her. "The so-called evidence against me has been fabricated by individuals with their own agenda," she continued. "I'm confident that a proper investigation will reveal the truth about my husband's condition and the people who are exploiting it." Janet Morrison was in the crowd of reporters, and she raised her hand to ask a question. "Mrs. Halloway, can you explain why your husband's ticket was canceled just hours before asset transfers began appearing in Swiss accounts?" Lana's composure flickered for just a moment. "I don't know anything about Swiss accounts. My husband's travel arrangements were changed due to his erratic behavior at the airport." "We have audio recordings of your conversations with airport staff specifically requesting that your husband be denied assistance. How do you explain that?" "I have no comment on alleged recordings that I haven't been allowed to examine." The press conference continued for another 10 minutes, but Lana was clearly struggling to maintain her narrative against increasingly specific questions. When it ended, she retreated into the building without taking additional questions. "She's better than I expected," Seren observed, "but she's fighting a losing battle." My phone rang with a call from a number I recognized, my business partner, Tom Bradley, calling from our construction company's office in Manhattan. "Darren, what the hell is going on? I've got reporters calling about fraud investigations and asset seizures." "It's complicated, Tom. Lana's been stealing from our joint accounts and trying to frame me as mentally unstable to cover her tracks." "Jesus, how much are we talking about?" "Nearly $2 million from our personal accounts. I don't know if she had access to company funds. I'm looking at our accounts right now. There was a transfer authorization request yesterday for $500,000, but it was flagged for manual review because it came from an unusual location." My stomach tightened. Lana had tried to steal from the company as well, probably planning to blame that on my supposed instability. "Don't authorize anything until this gets sorted out," I said. "Already done. And Darren, I never believed for a second that you were unstable. Lana called me last week asking questions about your behavior, whether you'd seemed paranoid or erratic. I thought it was weird at the time." After ending the call, I realized that Lana's scheme had been even more comprehensive than we'd discovered. She'd been laying groundwork with my business associates, preparing them to accept the narrative of my mental breakdown. She was building a complete case, I told Seren. Not just financial fraud, but a psychological profile that would explain away any resistance I might offer. Which makes her actions even more criminal. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated campaign of destruction. Seren's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Claire. "Viktor's been detained at the airport. Customs officials found irregularities in his documentation and evidence of suspicious financial activity." "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that require extended questioning and a thorough review of his recent transactions. He won't be making that flight to Switzerland." I felt a surge of satisfaction at the news. Viktor had spent months planning his escape, only to be trapped by his own arrogance and Seren's careful preparation. What happens now? Now we wait for Viktor to realize that his best option is cooperation. When someone faces serious criminal charges, they often become very willing to discuss their accomplices. The implication was clear. If Viktor decided to save himself by exposing Lana's role in the scheme, her carefully constructed defense would collapse entirely. My phone rang again, this time with Lana's number. I looked at Seren, who nodded encouragingly. "Answer it. Let's hear how she's handling the pressure." I accepted the call and put it on speaker. Lana's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Darren, we need to talk. This has gone too far." "I agree. It went too far when you decided to steal $2 million and frame me as mentally ill. That's not... Look, I made some mistakes. I was confused. Viktor was manipulative. I see that now. But we can fix this if we work together." The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. The confident woman who'd abandoned me at the airport had been replaced by someone scrambling to avoid consequences. "How do you propose we fix it?" "I can return the money, all of it, and I'll make a public statement explaining that I was manipulated by Viktor, that you were never unstable or dangerous." "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for you dropping this media campaign and not pressing criminal charges." I looked at Seren, who shook her head firmly. "I'll consider your offer," I said, "but first I want you to do something for me." "What?" "I want you to experience exactly what you put me through. Cancel your credit cards, drain your personal accounts, and spend a night with no resources and no help. Then we'll talk about whether you understand the position you put me in." The line went quiet for several seconds. When Lana spoke again, her voice was cold and calculating. "You're making a mistake, Darren. I have lawyers, I have connections, and I have evidence of your recent erratic behavior. If you don't drop this crusade, I'll destroy your reputation so thoroughly that you'll never recover." "You already tried that. How's it working out for you?" I ended the call and looked at Seren. She's not going to cooperate. I didn't expect her to. People like Lana don't accept responsibility. They double down and hope they can outlast their opponents. So what's our next move? We let the legal system handle Viktor, while we focus on making sure Lana faces the consequences of her choices. The evidence speaks for itself, and public opinion is firmly on your side. As evening fell over Paris, I stood at the window of Seren's office and thought about how much had changed in 36 hours. I'd gone from abandoned husband to the center of an international fraud investigation, from victim to someone with the power to determine his enemy's fate. Lana had wanted to teach me my place. She'd succeeded, but not in the way she'd intended. My place wasn't as her subordinate or victim. It was as someone strong enough to fight back when attacked. The war wasn't over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Lana and Viktor had underestimated their target, and now they were facing consequences they'd never anticipated. Justice, I was learning, could be very satisfying when properly administered. The Swiss authorities moved faster than anyone expected. By morning, Viktor was facing formal charges for financial fraud and money laundering, with additional investigations pending in 3 other countries where his previous victims had filed complaints. The carefully constructed escape plan had become a trap from which there was no exit. I watched the news coverage from my suite at the George V, drinking coffee while reporters detailed the scope of what they were calling an international romance fraud scheme. The story had evolved beyond my personal situation into a broader investigation of predatory behavior targeting vulnerable spouses. Seren arrived with updates from her legal team and a grim expression that suggested the news wasn't entirely good. "Viktor's talking," she said without preamble. "He's provided detailed information about his arrangement with Lana in exchange for reduced charges." "What kind of arrangement?" "According to Viktor, your wife approached him 6 months ago with a specific proposal. She'd identified you as a target with significant assets and minimal protection, and she wanted his expertise in extraction and transfer." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd assumed that Lana had been seduced by Viktor's charm and manipulated into betraying me. The reality was far worse. She'd been the architect of her own betrayal. She recruited him? She recruited him, planned the timeline, and coordinated every aspect of the scheme. Viktor was essentially a contractor hired to help her steal your assets and disappear. Seren handed me a tablet displaying what appeared to be a formal legal statement. Viktor's confession includes details about 3 previous cases where Lana provided intelligence and support for similar operations. I read through the document, recognizing the clinical precision of Lana's planning and the scope of her involvement in Viktor's criminal enterprise. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been systematically helping him destroy other marriages for years. How many people did she help him rob? At least 7 that we can document, possibly more. The pattern was always the same. Lana would identify potential targets through her professional network, Viktor would initiate contact, and they'd split the proceeds after the assets were liquidated. The scope of my wife's criminal activity was staggering. She'd built an entire secondary career around identifying and destroying vulnerable spouses, using her position in the financial industry to target people who trusted her expertise. What's her legal exposure? Significant. International fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and potentially racketeering charges. She's looking at serious prison time if convicted. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Tom Bradley. I answered it, curious about what new developments might be emerging in New York. Darren, you need to know what's happening here. Lana showed up at the office this morning with 2 lawyers and a court order demanding access to company records. What kind of court order? Something about protecting marital assets from dissipation. She's claiming that you're hiding money in the business to prevent her from accessing it in divorce proceedings. I looked at Seren, who was already pulling up legal databases on her laptop. Did you give her access? Hell no. Our lawyer says the order is questionable and we're not turning over anything until it's been properly reviewed. But Darren, she's not acting like someone who's been caught. She's acting like someone who thinks she can still win. After ending the call, I realized that Lana was implementing some kind of backup plan, probably developed in case her original scheme was discovered. She was trying to reframe the situation as a divorce dispute rather than a criminal matter. She's attempting to gain control of the narrative, Seren observed. If she can make this look like a marital disagreement rather than organized fraud, she might be able to avoid criminal charges. Will it work? Not with Viktor's confession and the evidence we've compiled, but it might complicate the legal proceedings and delay justice. Seren's phone rang with a call from Jennifer, who was monitoring legal developments in New York. The conversation was brief but intense, and Seren's expression grew increasingly serious as she listened. Lana's filed for emergency divorce proceedings, Jennifer reported through the speaker. She's claiming that you've become mentally unstable and are attempting to destroy her reputation through false accusations. Can she do that? She can try, but the evidence against her is overwhelming, and Viktor's confession undermines any claim of innocence. The divorce court will have to consider the criminal investigation. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Paris streets where normal people were living normal lives. 3 days ago, I'd been one of them, a successful businessman with a stable marriage and a comfortable future. Now I was the center of an international criminal investigation involving millions of dollars and multiple victims. I want to go home, I said. I want to face this directly instead of managing it from a distance. Are you sure? Lana's lawyers will try to use your presence against you, claim that you're attempting to intimidate her or interfere with the proceedings. Let them try. I'm not hiding from my own life. Seren nodded approvingly. Then we'll go together. My team can continue the investigation from New York, and we'll make sure you have proper legal representation. The flight to New York gave me time to process everything I'd learned and prepare for what was coming. Lana wasn't just unfaithful. She was a career criminal who'd been using our marriage as cover for systematic fraud. Viktor wasn't just her lover. He was her business partner in a scheme that had destroyed multiple families. The man who'd been abandoned at Charles de Gaulle Airport no longer existed. In his place was someone harder, more realistic, and completely committed to ensuring that justice was served. When we landed at JFK, reporters were waiting. The story had grown beyond financial news into mainstream media, and my return to New York was being treated as a major development in an ongoing investigation. "Mr. Halloway, how do you respond to your wife's claims that you're mentally unstable?" one reporter shouted as we made our way through the terminal. "I respond with evidence," I said, stopping to face the cameras. "My wife has been involved in an international fraud scheme for years. She recruited Viktor Morel to help her steal assets from multiple victims, including me. The evidence is overwhelming, and the authorities are taking it seriously." "What do you say to people who think this is just a bitter divorce dispute?" "I say they should look at the facts. 6 months of documented planning, millions of dollars in fraudulent transfers, and a pattern of criminal behavior spanning multiple years. This isn't a divorce dispute. It's an organized crime investigation." The press conference was brief, but effective. I'd established my credibility and framed the narrative in terms of criminal justice rather than personal grievance. Lana would have a much harder time portraying herself as the victim of an unstable husband. The drive into Manhattan took us past familiar landmarks that now seemed strange and distant. The city hadn't changed, but my relationship to it had been fundamentally altered. I was no longer a resident. I was a returning exile with scores to settle. "Are you ready for this?" Seren asked as we approached my apartment building. "I've been ready since the moment she left me in that airport," I replied. "She wanted to destroy me quietly. Instead, she's about to learn what happens when you underestimate your target." The doorman recognized me and nodded respectfully, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. The entire building had probably been following the news coverage, wondering what kind of drama would unfold when I finally came home. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending toward a final confrontation that had been inevitable since the moment Lana canceled my ticket. She'd started this war with careful planning and overwhelming advantages. I was going to finish it with truth, evidence, and the kind of determination that only comes from being betrayed by someone you trusted completely. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into the hallway and walked toward the apartment where my marriage had died, and my real life was about to begin. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it 3 days earlier, but it felt like entering a museum exhibit of someone else's life. The expensive furniture, the carefully curated art, the panoramic view of Central Park, all of it seemed hollow and meaningless now that I understood the criminal enterprise that had paid for it. Lana was waiting in the living room with 2 lawyers, a court stenographer, and what appeared to be a private investigator. She'd transformed the space into a legal battlefield, complete with boxes of documents and recording equipment. "Darren," she said, standing as I entered. Her voice was carefully modulated, projecting calm authority despite the chaos surrounding her. "I'm glad you're home. We need to discuss how to resolve this situation. The only resolution is your confession and cooperation with the authorities," I replied, taking a seat across from her legal team. "Viktor's already provided a complete statement about your criminal partnership." One of her lawyers, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, leaned forward aggressively. "Mr. Halloway, my client is prepared to offer a generous settlement in exchange for your agreement to cease this defamatory media campaign. Your client is a career criminal who's been stealing from innocent people for years. There won't be any settlement." Lana's composure cracked slightly, revealing the desperation underneath her professional facade. "Darren, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can rebuild what we had." "What we had was built on lies. You've been planning to rob me since before we were married." The private investigator, a heavy-set man with the demeanor of an ex-cop, pulled out a tablet and began reading from what appeared to be a prepared report. "Mr. Halloway, we have evidence of your recent erratic behavior, including documented instances of paranoia, aggressive confrontations, and possible substance abuse. Your mental state has clearly deteriorated. I looked at the man with genuine curiosity. What kind of evidence? Witness statements from business associates, medical records indicating prescription drug use, and surveillance footage showing volatile behavior in public settings. Seren, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. May we examine this evidence? The investigator hesitated, glancing at Lana's lawyers before responding. The evidence is being prepared for court presentation and isn't available for informal review. Of course it isn't, Seren said, with a predatory smile. Because it's fabricated, just like everything else your client has presented. She pulled out her own tablet and began displaying documents on the large screen television mounted on the wall. This is a complete timeline of Mrs. Halloway's criminal activities, supported by bank records, communication logs, and sworn statements from multiple victims. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously organized. 6 years of systematic fraud, dozens of victims, millions of dollars in stolen assets, all coordinated by the woman I'd shared a bed with for 12 years. Lana's lead lawyer tried to interrupt. This alleged evidence was obtained through illegal surveillance and violates our client's privacy rights. This evidence was obtained through legitimate investigation by licensed professionals working with international law enforcement, Seren replied. Everything you're seeing has been verified and authenticated by multiple independent sources. I watched Lana's face as the scope of the evidence became clear. Her carefully maintained composure was crumbling, replaced by the kind of panic that comes from realizing that all escape routes have been blocked. Darren, she said, ignoring her lawyers and addressing me directly. You don't understand what you're doing. These people are using you to settle their own scores with Viktor. I'm your wife. I love you. You're a criminal who's been stealing from me since the day we met, I replied. And you're not my wife anymore. I filed for divorce this morning. The statement was true. Seren's legal team had prepared and submitted the paperwork while we were en route from the airport, ensuring that I controlled the narrative around the end of our marriage. Lana's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath her performed vulnerability. You have no idea what you've started. I have connections, resources, information that could destroy you if this continues. What kind of information? Business dealings that weren't entirely legal, tax strategies that might not withstand scrutiny, personal behavior that your new friends might find interesting. The threat was delivered with the confidence of someone who'd been collecting leverage for years, probably planning to use it if her original scheme was discovered. Go ahead, I said. Release whatever you have. I'm curious to see how it compares to 6 years of documented fraud and conspiracy charges. Lana's lawyer tried to regain control of the situation. Mr. Halloway, my client is prepared to make a substantial financial settlement in exchange for your cooperation in resolving this matter quietly. How substantial? Full restoration of the transferred assets, plus an additional $2 million in compensation for your inconvenience. The offer was larger than I'd expected, suggesting that Lana had access to far more stolen money than we'd initially calculated. She'd been running this scheme longer and more successfully than anyone realized. Where would the additional $2 million come from? I asked. The lawyer hesitated, realizing he'd revealed more than intended. My client has various investment accounts and business interests. You mean she has accounts full of money stolen from other victims, Seren corrected. Money that belongs to people whose lives she destroyed. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, curious about who might be trying to reach me during this confrontation. Mr. Halloway, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. We have a warrant for your wife's arrest in connection with an international fraud investigation. I looked at Lana, whose face had gone completely pale. They're here now. We're in the building lobby. Can you provide access to your apartment? Of course. I ended the call and stood up. Lana, you have about 2 minutes before the police arrive to arrest you. You can spend that time confessing and cooperating, or you can spend it preparing for a very public perp walk. Her lawyers immediately began gathering documents and whispering urgent instructions, but Lana remained frozen in her chair, staring at me with an expression of complete disbelief. "You really did this," she said. "You actually destroyed our marriage over a misunderstanding." "I destroyed our marriage? You've been robbing me for years, while planning to frame me as mentally ill. You recruited a career criminal to help you steal everything I worked for. You left me stranded in a foreign country with no resources and no way home." The elevator chimed in the hallway, followed by the sound of multiple footsteps approaching our door. "This was never a marriage," I continued. "It was a long-term theft operation disguised as a relationship. The only misunderstanding was mine. I thought I was married to someone who loved me." The doorbell rang, followed by a firm knock and the announcement, "NYPD, we have a warrant." Lana stood up slowly, her expensive clothes and perfect makeup unable to disguise the defeat in her posture. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked exactly like what she was, a criminal facing the consequences of her choices. "This isn't over," she said, as I walked toward the door. "Yes, it is." I opened the door to find Detective Martinez and 3 uniformed officers waiting in the hallway. Behind them stood a small crowd of neighbors who'd been drawn by the commotion. "Lana Halloway," Detective Martinez announced, entering the apartment with her team. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and interstate transportation of stolen property." As they read Lana her rights and placed her in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with my own choices. The woman who'd tried to destroy me was finally facing justice, and I was free to build whatever life I wanted without her manipulation and betrayal. Seren approached as the police led Lana away. "How do you feel?" "Like I finally learned my place," I said, watching my former wife disappear into the elevator. "And it's not as anyone's victim." The apartment fell silent after everyone left, leaving me alone with the wreckage of a life I'd thought was real. But instead of sadness, I felt only relief. The lies were over, the truth was established, and justice was being served. Lana had wanted to teach me my place. She'd succeeded, but not in the way she'd intended. My place was as someone strong enough to fight back when attacked, smart enough to recognize the truth when it was revealed, and determined enough to see justice through to its conclusion. The war was over, and I had won.